Hola guys! So this video is about the preterite versus the imperfect. I know we've briefly discussed kind of the difference between the two, but now we're going to discuss it in more detail. So first off, as you know, Spanish has two basic ways to talk about the past, the preterite and the imperfect. So in this slideshow or PowerPoint, we're going to, look at some differences in how each of the tenses are used. So let's start with a little review on the preterite tense. So this verb tense is used when we talk about a past action that, for different reasons, happened one time or interrupted something already going on, was at the beginning of an event, or was at the end of an event. So we're going to look at some examples of these 4 points in knowing this is when we use the preterite tense. So the first reason, past actions that have happened once. Juan se levantó a las 6. So he gets up, or got up, sorry. Juan got up at 6 o'clock. It happened one time. Gloria llegó tarde a clase. Gloria arrived late to class. It happened once. Fui a España el verano pasado. I went to Spain last summer. Again, one and done. And you can even use it in a pregunta. ¿Hiciste la tarea? Did you do the homework? Did you do it? That one time, did you do it? Another reason why we use the preterite tense is when we talk about interruptions. So for example, in this sentence it says, El teléfono sonó mientras yo dormía. So the telephone rang while I was sleeping. So rang would be in the preterite tense because it's an interruption. The ringing interrupted the sleeping. So we use the preterite tense. Another time we use the preterite tense is when it talks about the beginning of an event. For example, Cristóbal Colón llegó a las Américas in 1492. Christopher Columbus arrived to the Americas in 1492. Okay, it was the beginning of an event. La película empezó a las 3. The movie started at 3 o'clock. Again, it was the beginning of an event. And the last reason that we use the preterite tense is the end of an event. Terminé el proyecto a la medianoche. I finished the project at midnight. I finished it, okay, in the middle of the night. It was the end of an event. Los Ojos de Chicago ganaron el campeonato de fútbol americano. The Chicago Bears won the football game. Okay, again, it was the end of an event. So that's when we use the preterite tense. For the imperfect, let's review some of the main uses for this, and we'll talk about when we use the imperfect tense. We use it when we talk about something that's happened many times, or was in progress, for example, ing, or describing a condition. So let's look at repeated or habitual actions in the past. Don Diego fumaba puros cubanos. Don Diego smoked Cuban cigars. Cuando yo tenía 15 años, vivía en Miami. When I had 15 years, I lived in Miami. Again, remember we talked about, it's like you're telling a story, something that's happened in the past. A past action in progress is another time you use the imperfect tense. A las 3, los estudiantes escuchaban mientras la profesora hablaba. At 3 o'clock, the students listened while the professor was talking. Okay, so it's an action in progress. Again, it's like you're telling a story to someone else. El teléfono sonó mientras yo dormía. Here's this sentence again, with dormía being in the imperfect tense because it was a past action in progress. ¿Qué hacías ayer a las 4 o'clock? What did you do yesterday at 4 o'clock? Again, it's asking about something that was in progress in the past. Another time we use the imperfect tense is describing a condition. And there's a lot that is entailed within this. And here's an acronym to help you remember when to use the imperfect and not the preterite in regards to certain situations. Al wept. So each of these letters stands for something. It's an acronym. Al wept. And for each of these, the acronym is to help you remember when to use the imperfect, not the preterite. So let's look at the A first. Anytime you want to express age, attitude, or appearance in the past tense, we use the imperfect. Cuando yo tenía 15 años. When I was 15. Again, we're talking about age. No me gustaba comer zanahorias. I didn't like to eat carrots. Okay, that's in regards to the age or the attitude. No me gustaba is attitude. I didn't like. That's an attitude. De niña, Marta era muy alta. As a child, Marta was very tall. And that's talking about appearance. So that's the A in Al wept. Again, all of it being in the imperfect tense. Let's look at the L. Location. So anytime we want to express location in the past tense, we use the imperfect, not the preterite. La chica acampaba en el bosque. Estaba allí 2 semanas. The girl camped in the forest. She was there 2 weeks. That's a location. Let's look at the W. Weather. Again, anytime we want to express weather, we use the imperfect, not the preterite. Hacía muy mal tiempo durante mis vacaciones. The weather was really bad during my vacations. Again, we're talking about the weather, so we use the imperfect, hacía. All right, the E, emotional state. Ella estaba nerviosa. So again, she was nervous. It's an emotional state. We use the imperfect. The P, physical attributes. Mi padre era muy alto y mi madre era muy baja. My dad was very tall and my mother was very short. Again, we're talking about a physical attribute, so we're using the imperfect. And finally, the T, which stands for time. Eran las 4 y todos teníamos mucha hambre. It was 4 o'clock and all of us had a lot of hunger, or all of us were very hungry. Again, we're talking about time. This sentence is talking about the specific time at 4 o'clock, so we use the imperfect tense. Okay, so remember the acronym Al wept. So let's have some practice. Choose the appropriate preterite or imperfect form. Fueron or eran, so you have to choose, las 10 de la mañana y hizo or hacía buen tiempo. So it was 10 in the morning and it was good weather. So we're talking about time and weather. So are we going to pick fueron, which is the preterite, or eran, which is the imperfect? And then are we going to pick hizo, which is the preterite, or hacía, which is the imperfect, if we're talking about time and weather? We pick eran and hacía, both of them being in the imperfect because it's talking about time and weather, which is part of the acronym Al wept. All right, let's do another one. Ella fue or era joven y bonita. She was young and beautiful. Are we going to pick the preterite, fue, or the imperfect, era, if we're talking about a physical attribute? Ella era joven y bonita. We picked the imperfect because, again, it's part of the acronym Al wept. It was the P, which stands for physical attribute. One more example. Let's look at a paragraph. Los niños jugaron or jugaban al fútbol en el parque. Su madre leía or leyó una novela debajo de un árbol. De pronto, uno de los niños caía or cayó, se golpeaba or golpeó la cabeza y empezaba or empezó a llorar. So let's look at what it means. The children played football or soccer in the park. His mom read a novel under a tree. Suddenly, one of the children fell and hit his head and started to cry. So in the first one, are we going to pick imperfect or are we going to pick preterite if it says the children played at the park or used to play in the park? It's kind of telling a story. Are we going to pick imperfect or preterite? His mom was reading a novel under the tree. Preterite or imperfect? Suddenly, So something sudden happened. It was an interruption. So which are we going to pick? The answers is going to be imperfect, imperfect, and the rest being preterite because all of this is telling a story. So we're going to pick the imperfect tense. Everything that happens right here, although it's kind of part of the story, it's an interruption to the story. De pronto means suddenly. Something happened. Something different interrupted what was going on. So remember, an interruption is the preterite tense. Okay? The last thing I want to show y'all is kind of, maybe this is a little bit confusing, choosing the preterite versus the imperfect. Maybe it's a tad bit confusing. Here are a few key words that if you see these in a sentence, you know you're going to pick the preterite or imperfect. Some are associated with the imperfect and others are with the preterite. So, here are some words that will help you in identifying if you see this word, you know you're going to use the imperfect tense. Siempre, which means always. If you see that in a sentence, 99% of the time, the sentence is going to be in the imperfect. Los sábados, on Saturdays. Todos los días, every day. A menudo, often. And so on and so forth. All of these words imply repetition, which means it's a habitual action, which means it's going to be in the imperfect tense. So anytime you see one of these words, siempre, los sábados, todos los días, or a menudo, and there are others as well, but especially these, anytime you see one of these words, note to self, the sentence is going to be in the imperfect. Okay? And now let's look at some that are dead giveaways in using the preterite. Una vez, which means once or one time. El sábado pasado, last Saturday. Un día, one day. Esta mañana, this morning. Anoche, last night. All of these words imply that the event happened once and it was done. So anytime you see one of these words, note to self, the sentence is going to be in the preterite tense. Okay? So that is it. Again, here is just a quick reminder when to use the preterite and when to use the imperfect. Not forgetting that in regards to the imperfect, right here when it says describing a condition, don't forget the acronym is Al wept. Okay? We're going to have some más práctica with this in clase, but here is the details in regards to when to use the preterite and when to use the imperfect. Adios, y that's all, folks.